Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. We are enveloped in a sea of desecration and idolatry, whether by destruction of a filmmaker's divine vision just to appease the profane, or the destruction of art for social justice, an act of defiant protest, at least in principle toward a higher cause, the burning of a holy flag, the decapitation of statues and monuments, or perhaps just the mere impersonation of protest, the virtue-signaling mirage of truth and justice, our golden cow of self-righteousness, our sacred scarecrow, kneeling when the horde shouts stand, standing when authority says sit. After all, Will Smith exercised an iron will, an iron fist against the rock of Chris, a right cross in desecration of the holy host. Behold, proof, I say, proof we live a simulation. Upon the sacred mound in the sacred temple, a monument itself embedded in the showy allure of celebrity worship, profanities echo worldwide. In the name of comforting certainties and validating security blankets, drones decimate farmers, children, and babies. Death of innocence, theirs and ours, a most vile contempt for the most vulnerable. But in the midst of this chaos sea of sickness, there is no excuse.
Ignorance is not the same as innocence, Miss Lane.
For the germ of Holy Scripture is nevertheless written, implanted, buried within the hearts and minds of each individual who need only quiet their fiery rationale, humble themselves, and listen inward. For there and here lies the key to unlocking the will of God. There and here where we become individual vessels of a good will, contrasting the feeble additions of the growing drone of the spiritually idle, the walking and talking dead, we stand upright and ready to embrace our divine dissolution where we abideth forever. Welcome back. We continue the chapter on seeking the sacred. Today we examine the appearances of desecration and idolatry throughout the SnyderVerse. First and foremost, relevant words and what they mean.
So hateful to sight and memory, the desecration without name.
And where is the Council of Krypton?
Destroyed, sir.
Then proceed.
So the first word we look at naturally is desecration. Where does it come from? What does it mean? It has a Latin root. The Latin word consecrare means to make sacred, which is the root of consecrate. So to desecrare or desecrate literally means to undo its sacred character, the opposite of consecrate. Something often talked about in terms of desecration is the desecration of a tombstone, a grave, or a place of worship. So something sacred, something that should be protected, something holy is destroyed or damaged in some manner. From Britannica, it is to violate the sanctity of, to treat disrespectfully, irreverently, or outrageously, to damage a holy place or object. To treat a holy place or object with disrespect. So it not only is to destroy or damage something that's holy, but to simply show disrespect towards that holy thing, which is important to include in our understanding of the word because of how it appears throughout the SnyderVerse. From dictionary.com, it is to divest something of its sacred character or office. Okay, so desecration is a lot like destruction. However, it implies something much more. It implies that there is a religious sense of an object or person or place, something with sacred character, something holy. An entry point for communion with the divine is somehow violated. Disrespected, right? And or damaged.
Where is the codex?
Thereby divesting it of or undoing its sacred character. Even one who tries to commune with the divine honestly and sincerely will find the path difficult, as the holy by nature requires a gentle and careful touch to unlock its divine glory. Consider then the stark contrast of such a delicate and precise hierophany, so specific in form, being disrespected, violated, shot, and pissed on. To desecrate the truly holy is to blaspheme, to sin, reveling in a vapid, nihilistic psychosis, unholy jubilee, ultimately at the expense of one's own living soul. An indication that you've just witnessed an act of desecration of something you hold sacred is the visceral trauma and repulsion internalized after its occurrence, even sometimes by its proponent. A related word is profane, right? So, referring to the state of being uninitiated, wicked, ignorant, unlearned, or impious. Someone profane treats something sacred with abuse, irreverence, or contempt, debasing the sacred by wrong, unworthy, or vulgar use. Someone profane is not concerned with religion or religious purposes, serving only to debase or defile what is holy, not being among the initiated, not possessing esoteric or expert knowledge. In fact, the word profane comes from the Latin profanum or profanus, which joins the prefix pro, meaning being outside of or coming before, with fanum, meaning a temple, sanctuary, or simply a sacred space or consecrated area. The word refers, therefore, to that which should be kept outside of the holy temple. Only the initiated should be able to enter such a holy space. To have profane things enter the holy space is profanation or desecration of the holy space. Here we see young Clark reading the Republic of Plato, suggesting he is interested in esoteric knowledge and wisdom. He is then confronted with the profane desecrating his sacred space by entering into it, opening the door and pulling him out. The bully is aggressively disrespectful. He tosses him and overall shows callous disdain for Clark, the holy hero who exercises self-control with his words and action, despite the part of him that wants to retaliate. Pete Ross also earlier played the role of a profane bully who desecrates his sacred personal space and speaks profanities towards him.
Come on, dick splash.
But upon witnessing divine miracle, Pete Ross is baptized, cleansed in the holy waters. Now with knowledge, he is initiated and treats the holy with due care and due respect. We also have an adult bully who is vulgar and therefore profane, desecrating, i.e. showing a joyous callousness and disrespect toward the women in the bar as well as Clark, the holy figure, again exercising a level of self-restraint. The profane are bound by wild desire, in the sense they cannot control their animalistic impulses. Again, we see the wolf image in the back suggesting a pack of wolves fitting for this alpha male type posturing. In Zack Snyder's Justice League, we see a different wild desire, greed or gluttony in this case, by wrongly prioritizing the food over safety. The profane is blind to the laws and rules of the cosmos, the order that keeps the lower outside of the phantom, the sacred space. Inherently, the breaking of this law is the desecration or profanation of the sacred. You see, the sins are expressions of a wild desire, the animalistic impulses. Mr. Hyde, whether it be pride, wrath, lust, greed, or gluttony, the vulgar man prioritizes the profane amongst or over and above the sacred, a false permutation of the proper hierarchy, the proper order, the proper cosmos. The profane man fails to suppress, subdue, or tame the profane attitudes of the animalistic drives within which he is bound. This brings us to the concept of idolatry, right? So where one worships physical objects as God, or shows an immoderate attachment or devotion to something. The worship of a picture, object, or someone or something other than God as though it were God. It is the subject of the first of the 10 Commandments, which states, "You shall have no other gods before the one true God." Reference addressed to a person or an object, the sun, the king, an animal, a statue. So we have this repeated idea of falsely relating physical objects, the material, as if it were God. So there is an idolatry associated with attachments to the worldly in the sense of that which is profane, encompassing the material allure of physical comforts as well as all the profane attitudes resulting from that attachment, such as in the 7 sins. We see Superman, just a guy, being worshipped as if he were God. And this is the problem in this picture, right? And that's kind of what he's feeling. We see the statue with false God written on it as a desecration, which is a marking explicitly calling out this idolatrous worship of Superman as some deity. We see that this visual of the Israelites reaching out toward their idolatrous image of the golden calf when Moses was away on Mount Sinai mirrors the reaching out toward Superman. As we reach for the sacred, as we seek communion with the divine, we are always at risk of reaching for the wrong thing, the false God. Therefore, we look at another word that I wanted to connect with, the concept of idolatry. Idle, meaning not working, not active, or not being used, not having any real purpose or value, not having much activity, such as idle rumors or gossip. Ultimately, there is a lack of meaning in idle activity. So Britannica has this piece written on Heidegger. They say Heidegger's views seem to be that the majority of human beings lead an existence that is inauthentic, rather than facing up to their own finitude, represented above all by the inevitability of death. Again, there goes that concept, memento mori. They seek distraction and escape in inauthentic modalities such as curiosity, ambiguity, and idle talk. So the curiosity here, I think, is idle curiosity, like that same sort of curiosity you might engage in when you're, clicking on that clickbait headline, news article, or tweet that pulls you in, but is ultimately not constructive, right? So that would be like idle curiosity. So there's idle curiosity and idle talk and general ambiguity. Heidegger characterized such conformity in terms of the notion of the anonymous das Man, the they. Conversely, the possibility of authentic being in the world seemed to portend the emergence of a new spiritual aristocracy. Such individuals would be capable of heeding the call of conscience to fulfill their potential for being a self. So what I like most about this is that it juxtaposes between idleness as inauthentic modality and the opposite of that, which is a call to conscience. So there's some goodness associated with a call to conscience, and there's a negative juxtaposition to idle modalities, so inauthentic modalities. And so what I want to do is connect the concept of idleness as idolatry, right? So to me, idolatry is idleness with respect to the divine work of the good. So idolatry can come in a lot of other ways that aren't simply like, they're worshiping a celebrity. That's certainly idolatrous. Or worshiping a golden calf. It doesn't have to be so obvious. What I'm saying is that there's a more general notion of idolatry where any time you put idle endeavors, profane endeavors, above the holy work of God's will, whatever that is, in the context, that is idolatrous, right? So idolatry can come in more frequently than we think. So whenever you're being idle with respect to the divine work, that is where idolatry also comes in. So we have a really good example of that in Batman versus Superman, where the cops are watching a football game, right? They're very much engaged in the football game, but they get a call, and that call is ignored, right? The guy turns it off.
Note Charlie 27 reports the screams coming from vacant home at 1939 Harbor Way.
Thomas, been great working with you.
And kind of looks to the other cop, the rookie cop, and the veteran cop turns it off and just continues the game, and he's just super captivated by it, right? So this is an example of putting an idleness above what is right. And so we see below there's actually women there that need to be helped, and yet they're putting their idle endeavors of a football game above the good work, above the divine work. And so they shut out that voice that says, hey, there's something wrong over here. You have the power to do something. You have the power to help. And instead you shut that voice off. And so that is an example of idolatry. So it's not, notice it's not like so literal in the sense they're not worshiping a golden calf. They're not worshiping Superman, let's say, but they are putting idol works ahead of the good works. Okay. And so that's the idea. So idolatry can really come in more subtle ways like this, and it occurs. My point is that idolatry actually does occur, especially from an esoteric perspective. So it's not just like you have to believe in Christianity, because in Christianity, in the Christian perspective, idolatry is anything above their definition of God, right? And so I want to kind of extrapolate that to be anything that is outside of the good work that you put ahead of the good work, right? So you don't need to be Christian. You can be any religion, or even be atheist or whatever it is. And the idea is that you are engaging in idolatrous behavior when you know in your heart of hearts something is right and you should be doing this, but you ignore it and you put something else ahead of that, right? And so that's what's happening here. And so ultimately we have this picture, right? So the false god is the golden calf, and they put that above the true God, right? And so what I'm saying is the false god is equivalent to idol works. So if you're just kind of sitting around watching the game and ignoring your potential for being a self, for living authentically, for answering the call to conscience, all of these things are related in juxtaposition to idleness, right? Idle talk, idle curiosity, all of these things, inauthentic modalities that aren't giving due diligence to the fact that, the inevitability of death, right? There's memento mori. Like this doesn't last. We need to do something. We need to operate in more authentic ways with the knowledge that we're finite beings, right? So the last thing I want to say with respect to this is that it's not the football game in and of itself that is idolatrous, right? It's not, it's just a football game. What is idolatrous is when there is something else you should be doing, something else that is important, something else that is divine work, that is good work. And in that knowing, you ignore it and you put an idle thing above the good thing, right? You've put something above something else. So it really is about that relationship between what is idle activity and what is a call to conscience, what is truly good, right? And so whenever you're putting something above that truly good thing, that's when it becomes idolatrous, right? You can enjoy yourself, you can, play games, you can do all sorts of things, but is that getting in the way of your ability to do something divine, to do the holy work, to do the good work, right? So this is when it becomes idolatrous, when you do put it as priority over the good work. All right, so there's going to be so many instances of desecration and idolatry. Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad forms of desecration, and you're going to see so many different flavors that I want to make sure it's clear how I'm abstracting it, because I'm abstracting in such a general way, you're going to have all these different flavors of it. And so I think it'll be helpful to look at a picture of that sort of general abstraction that I'm making. And so remember the word hierarchy. Hierarchy comes from the word hieros, meaning holy or sacred. A hierarchy is an order, right? There's an order of things. And so the idea that there is a holy order means that there is a place for what is holy, right? And there is a place for what is profane. So there's a holy space and there's a profane space. And when we have a hierarchy in our heads, or physically, we put the holy thing in the holy space, right? So I have here a picture of the heart of Christ representing sacrifice out of love, right? Enduring all those pains and hardships out of love. That represents like the good of the good, right? And so that's a really holy thing. We want to put that, we want to think of that also, not just put that physically. We want to think of that properly in our heads as holy, and so put it in a holy space in our heads as well. And in the profane space, we put the profane thing. So here I have the inverted image of the calf. It's trash, right? That's the stuff that's not important. It's profane. Don't worry. That's the bad stuff, right? So the golden calf is in the trash, right? So that's in the profane space. So this, if we had this picture always, we'd always be in a good state. The problem is that we're constantly having opportunities to fill those spaces. So we have a holy space and we have a profane space again, a moment later. And in that moment later, if we instead put the holy thing in the profane space, we've inverted it in some way, and that is a bad thing. That is a negative thing. That is an evil thing. That is a desecration of a holy thing when you put a holy thing in a profane space. Okay? So that little red arrow is like desecration of, or represents desecration of a holy thing, because you falsely put it as not being important. You put it in the trash. You put something holy in the trash. That's desecration. Also, you could put the profane thing in the holy space. That is another type of desecration, and doing them both is like the most unholy you could possibly do, right? So you not only have put the holy thing in the trash, you've elevated this golden calf, right? So idleness, sin, all of that is represented by these red lines, putting what is holy in the profane space and what is profane in the holy space. So you've desecrated the proper order of the cosmos, right? The proper cosmos, the proper hierarchy. So this is what the villain does. The villain of the story, and it can be any person at any given moment, because it's like every moment we're being asked to maintain this holy space and this profane space properly. And so from one moment you can become a villain, from the next moment you can be a hero again, and so all of that, it's just a continuous thing. So we have to continually put holy things in the holy space, profane things in the profane space, and we have to keep them there. Life comes along, and for whatever reason, people will desecrate that holy thing. Bad things happen to them. They then worship the golden calf. They defile the holy thing, putting in the profane space. Okay? And so it is the task of the hero to kind of restructure, to do the divine work of re-sanctification, re-purification, re-establishment of what is truly holy. Well, that is going backwards on this, right? So taking the holy thing that was in the trash and putting it back into the holy space. And putting the golden calf, taking that from the holy space and putting it back into the trash, the profane space. This is it. This is all there is. And so if you buy into an idolatrous image on the right, you will see those green lines as desecration, as a false desecration, as a bad desecration. It'll hurt you when that is done, because you've put stake in an idolatrous image, which is on the right. So the idolatrous image on the right with the golden calf above is also a desecration. So idolatry is desecration of the holy thing. It is the hero that will dismantle, desecrate the unholy thing repurifying and replacing back what is holy in its proper place and what is unholy in its proper place. Okay, so the idea is that this is all there is. It is all there is. At every moment, every being, every individual, are you putting holy things in the holy space? Are you, and what that means is not in a physical place always, that's a physical representation of it, but are you properly prioritizing the good, right? That's the hierarchy that we're talking about. That's what it means to be in a holy space. That means you've properly prioritized it. That means you're acting on it as if it is truly a priority. And so if you prioritize golden calves, well, you're operating on the right side, which is bad, which is a desecration of the holy. If you're prioritizing the good, you're operating on the left side, so that's the good thing, right? And this is all psychological. It's all in the head. It's not, we do these rituals and symbols to express something that is internal. And so the spiritual path is to continually do the work of those green lines. So the green lines represent the divine work, by the way. So the green lines represent the divine will of God, the covenant with God, doing the divine work, putting the unholy in the profane, in the holy space. Now, this is just a very simplified version, but really you can have layers of this, right? You can have holy, you can have even more holy, you can have holy of holies, right? So you can generalize this to more of a gradient of holy and profane, but this is the basic picture in this kind of like on and off kind of version, right? So there's holy and not holy, right? And so this is it, okay? So as we go over the examples, I won't be going over this point at every time. We'll come back to this picture, but it's good to keep this idea in the back of our head, because sometimes what will look like a bad thing, that will look like desecration, like a bad desecration, will actually be a good desecration. Because remember, the green lines, to put things back into the profane space, sometimes you have to destroy, you have to desecrate the unholy image. So desecration isn't always bad. Sometimes it's good and is equivalent to sacrifice. Sometimes it's equivalent to purification, reestablishment of a holy space, a holy temple. And again, the temple is up here. That's why I think these are called temples, right? So next time we will look at the variety of examples throughout the SnyderVerse covering the concept of desecration and idolatry. I'll see you next time.